Podcasting for business, is it right or not? Well, I've recorded a special episode of Podcast Done For You dedicated to this subject, and we tackle all of the major issues from credibility to education to brand presence to brand building to, most importantly, sales opportunities and knocking open those doors that you can't otherwise reach, and how you make all of this happen really easily. So I'd love to see you watching this episode of Podcast Done For You, the show, and don't forget to subscribe on the link below. Welcome to Podcast Done For You, the show where we make it as easy as possible for you to make the right choices to advance your podcasting career. So let's get started on the show. Podcasting for business, that is the main topic of discussion today. Should you do it? How do you do it? And why should you do it? Well, lots of big decisions to be made along that front, but I really want to get into the nuts and bolts of it all. Let's really talk to the idea of podcasting. Why should you do it? Well, there are a few basic reasons why you should do it. The first of all, I want to go through them at a high level, and then I'll take you through them individually. Now, the high level idea, of course, is ultimately, what are you doing podcasting for? The same thing you're doing a lot of activities for that are out there in the public is you ultimately want to build sales. You want to create more sales opportunities. You want to grow your business. That's the primary reason you want to do a lot of these activities, and podcasting is out there as one of the favorites for doing that. And we'll get into that in a little while. You also want to be doing it because you're educating your audience. You also want to be doing it because you're creating huge amounts of content. And of course, you want to be doing it because you're building credibility, you're building your brand presence. So let me take you through each of these things one by one and explain why you should be doing it, because we're having a conversation because you really want to understand it. That's why you're here. Podcasting for business. Is it right for you? Now, let me just start off by saying to you, if you're here and you are thinking about it, by all means, I want you to stay tuned for the rest of the conversation that we're going to have with each other. But if you want to cut to the chase, look, podcasting is a fantastic idea for most businesses. And if you want someone to help make it happen, that's why we have the service Podcast Done For You. You can go straight to the show notes and click on the details of how to get in touch with me directly. We can have a conversation and just make it happen. We anchor the program, we publish the program, we can even help you distribute the program. It's all a complete done for you service, very different in the market to anyone else out there in the way we approach things. So check it out, Podcast Done For You. Now, back to the topic at hand. Let's start off with the whole idea of building credibility. Now, that's one of the key ideas for having a podcast. Credibility is a difficult thing to achieve because it really relies on you being able to put information out there on a consistent basis. You don't have credibility if nobody knows that you exist. You have credibility because people hear from you and hear your stories. It's not necessarily just about explaining this is how you do something. In fact, more often than not, it's not about that, because people come to you because they want you to do something for them. So your credibility speaks to not just a simple resume, it's about your experiences. It's what's differentiating you in the marketplace. So if you can build your credibility through telling stories, why wouldn't you do it? And podcasting represents the greatest medium to be able to do that because it is incredibly accessible to anybody 24/7, not least of which is opportunities that we'll talk about later on how to distribute it. So when you think of that, when you think of podcasting, do think about building credibility. Now, there's a topic I'm not going to go into in any detail here because we've recorded other episodes about it. But when you start looking at the format for your podcast, remember the credibility factor is huge. It's why we offer an anchoring service so that we anchor your podcast so you can focus on being the credible expert. Too often I see podcasts that are produced by business where the person leading it really has no idea on how to conduct an interview in the first place if they're going to bring on guests. Secondly, when they do conduct an interview, they end up being the fan or the supporter and they don't demonstrate any of their credibility. Then thirdly, What I also see is where that people are trying to talk directly to camera, like what I'm doing with you today. I'm trying to do it as a conversation, but it's not easy. And let's not mistake it, to stand or to sit, whichever one you prefer, in front of a microphone and potentially a camera, as I'm doing today for those of you watching on YouTube, that having a conversation for a period of time and making it feel like you are talking to someone takes a bit of an art form, and it really depends on the topic that you're covering as to how easy that may be. So that's something to keep in mind, and it's why we offer that service. So let's come back away from credibility and let's just focus on sales for a moment, because then we need to get into all of the nuts and bolts of it. Now, as I said at the beginning, the reason you do a podcast in business is often because you want to drive sales. And that's perfectly valid reason. And why would you do that? Well, again, it's because people are getting to hear from you on a regular basis. And if you want someone to buy from you, well, they've got to get to know you. That whole like, know, trust thing is an incredibly important part of building a relationship with an audience so that they want to buy from you and not the next person. Now, the opportunity for you to engage with people when and where they want in a way like this, that there's no, we're not editing here. If I make a mistake, you're going to see it. Now, of course, you can edit a podcast and a video and cut some of those things out, but only to a certain degree. And the main thing is you can tell that this is a genuine story. You can tell when someone's reading a script, and I'm not reading a script. I'd be lying if I didn't say I have a couple of notes here to just remind me on what I want to talk about, and that's perfectly fine. But there's a big difference between telling a story and engaging with an audience directly and having something, for example, just written down, a brochure that you might send out, or a flat website. This gives something more dynamic where people get to know the people behind it, hear the stories, the experiences there that really drive it. That's what's going to drive sales. When you think about it, when you are out there and you're actually selling with a person one-on-one, when you get to that point, you're adapting stories and situations depending on the person that's in front of you. If you're in marketing like myself, it's the precursor to the sales conversation. And this is where podcasting really comes to its fore. It's not about selling directly. Yes, I've mentioned my podcast Done For You service in there, but there's an opportunity to do that, but it's not the main topic. If I made this podcast or any of the other podcasts that I'm involved with, and there are many that I'm involved with, then purely about selling that particular product or service, then no one would listen for more than a few seconds, because then it goes from being a podcast to being an ad. And there is a big difference between those two, as I'm sure you appreciate and understand. So this is really an opportunity to create sales, in the future. It's a sales opportunity generator, not a selling tool. And there's a big difference between the two. And I'm sure you understand that. Now, let's move on a little bit from that to the whole idea of educating your audience, because it is an incredibly important thing to do. The truth is that anyone in business will tell you the majority of your existing audience has no idea of the full set of value options that you offer. They know a certain part because they've been engaged with that, and they might know one or two other facets, but they probably don't have the full grasp of it all. So podcasts can educate, I should say, your existing audience. And that is a really important thing, because ultimately it leads to people wanting to buy more from you. They've already got a relationship with you, so why wouldn't they buy more from you if they knew that there were these opportunities in front of them? Then there is the other educating of new people. So one of the key things that everyone needs to be doing these days in business is being out there on social media. Now, depends on your business as to which is the right platform for you. But the one thing that they have in common is you need to feed content to them on a regular basis. Podcasting provides that opportunity. Once you're having these conversations in the form of a podcast, pulling them apart and extracting variations of them so they can go onto social media is the easy part that anyone in your team might be able to do, or you can have a service, whether it's mine or plenty of others out there, that will be able to do that element for you. That's the easy part. The hard part is creating the original content. And that's what you're doing in the podcast by having a conversation. So it actually creates a lot of efficiencies as well in that whole process. So anyone that's been involved in trying to produce social media content for a business knows how time consuming that can be to extract the right information. Podcasting helps you cut through all of that because you've got this chunk of content, and then you want to draw people to the podcast. Again, rather than what a lot of people do with their content is sell, 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 you're driving people to engage further in a conversation through the art of podcasting. And eventually, if they're interested, they'll take the next step and engage with you directly, already knowing quite a bit about you and feeling as though they've got to know you, as I hope you have got to know me a little bit. Now, the one thing as well that backs onto all of that is brand presence, because the more that you are out there, and the more that you're out there on multiple platforms, and let's not forget, that is one of the key things about podcasting as well, that you can be on multiple platforms. For those of you watching here now on YouTube, hello. For those of you on Spotify, hello to you. On Apple Podcasts, hello to you. Amazon Podcasts and any of the other podcast platforms, hello to you. If you're taking a snippet of this and you're seeing it on Instagram, on Twitter, or X as it's called now, any number of the other platforms. We're on Facebook and we're particularly on LinkedIn. So hello to all my LinkedIn fans that are out there at the moment. This is the place to come to for podcasts and for credibility building, because this is where you generate so much content. This is where, and I'm not talking about LinkedIn here, although yes, LinkedIn is where you can publish it all. I'm just talking about the whole idea here of podcasting. It is that educating tool. It is that content provider, and it is cutting through and making it easy to get on those multiple platforms in a very easy fashion. And without getting into all the details of it here, of course, if you start with video, you can, of course, extract the audio. You can create short videos. You can create reels. You can create blog content. You can create content for newsletters, for email blasts, for many other things. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about as well here when you talk about brand presence is really about the brand itself. Now, again, what distinguishes you in the marketplace is, of course, your stories, your experiences, you. In many cases, particularly if you're a small business where it's about one or two people who are the front people in the business, it's very much about your stories. So why not share them on a platform like this? Because again, if you're talking to the idea of brand presence, then really at a networking meeting, you can only reach the few people that are in the room. With a podcast, you can reach anybody, anytime. Now, again, reflecting your brand is incredibly important. It's the one thing that I've seen done really badly in business podcasts, and I want you to avoid this at all costs. And again, not wanting to put a big ad in here for myself, but I'm putting it here for a reason. You need to be professional in how you approach doing the podcast. It doesn't need to be an over-the-top and lavish production. There's things that we can manage, and that's why you get someone like me to manage it all for you, because it needs to look like you and reflect your brand. It's the same as you, if you were invited to speak at a seminar, would you turn up in inappropriate clothing, whatever that is for your business? So, for most people, would you turn up in shorts and a t-shirt and thongs and jump on stage and talk to people in that way? You probably wouldn't, unless that was appropriate for your brand. And so your podcast needs to be reflective of your brand as well. So it needs to be as professional as your brand, so it adds value to your brand. And that's where it comes to the fore. So it is a really important facet of podcasting for business, is to make sure that your brand is in harmony with what you're doing, which brings me very much to the idea of the content that you need to create. And that's a whole nother video that we're going to come up with soon. But just to say that you need to be talking to your audience. And if you talk to your audience in a way that's befitting of them, then you're adding value to your brand. You've got to talk in a way that's reflective of your brand, the tone of voice, present things in the way they should be presented on video. So if you're doing video, it's what you're wearing. If you're just focusing on the audio, then you need to make sure the words and the voice are right. Now, that does not mean scripting. Please, please, please don't script your podcasts. It is horrible. Do not do that. Unless you are an actor who is going to memorize things, and even then, I wouldn't do it. It is much better when you are being authentic. It is the one true medium that is truly authentic. And that's what I love so much about podcasting and why it adds so much value. Now, if we go on to other things that podcasting does for business, it's opening doors. Here's the thing. There are two ways that podcasting opens doors for you. And you think about this. There are, in any business, people that you would like to have a discussion with. Now, that might be ultimately to sell to them, or it might be because you want to learn from them or work with them, any number of those reasons. You want to open those doors. Podcasting is the perfect opportunity. Now, I've had conversations on my other podcast, Biz Bites, with people that, look, quite frankly, there's no way I would have got in the front door in the first place without the podcast. I've managed to have conversations that other people pay these people copious amounts of money to have consultation type with them. I didn't have a consultation with them, but I had a conversation with them where I learned and I gave as well. And instead of me being just the pupil listening, I was able to engage with them in a conversation that heightened me and heightened them as well, puts me in the same league as them, and allows me to open those doors and indeed open those doors to their audiences as well. So that's one of the other key things, is by bringing other people in, you open audience opportunities with others. But there's also this other idea of people that you would like to do business with that you can't have a conversation with at the moment because the doors are shut. So here's the thing, that yes, you sent an email, hey, I want to have a conversation with such and such, and they shut the door. You don't get past, maybe it's the executive assistant or someone that is even standing in front of you in the first place. But here's the difference. With a podcast, and you're sending people something specific that you know they'll be interested in because that's the nature of the conversation that you've had, then sending this to them and say, hey, check it out. You might be interested in this, is non-selling and non-evasive. And you know what? Whether they listen to the full thing or not, it started the relationship. And hopefully they will listen to part of it at least, because you could send them a small snippet of it as a tease and say, I'd love your feedback on it. Maybe I'd love to have you on the program in the future. Because the podcast is as much about opening opportunities as it is about driving those opportunities with existing clients and with potential clients, as it is with, as I said, opportunities with people who you would love to have a conversation with, but just can't get in the front door. So many facets why podcasting for business is really important. But let me summarize with a couple of other key points when it comes to making the decision about whether you should do it or not. Very, very simple. There are millions, in fact, into the billions. I think it is 1.1 billion websites for business out there. There are, at a conservative estimate, less than 225,000, so a long way short of 1.1 billion podcasts for business that are active at the moment. On the other hand, there are 500 million listeners per month of podcasts. There are how many millions of people on the social media platforms dying for content. And depending on when you're watching this, it's about to be or soon to be released. I know that LinkedIn is starting to really favor video content even more, and it's creating new feeds where authentic voice is going to be the differentiator. So again, you've got an absolutely brilliant tool to be taking you across and providing that level of content. So in summary, if you ask me the question, podcasting for business, is it a good idea? It is an amazing idea. It is something that you must have in your business. There are not many businesses where I would be able to tell you, I don't think it's a good idea. There are some, but I think most of you out there will be saying, yep, I think this is right. In fact, I would guarantee you that if you've got this far in the video, that it absolutely is something that is sitting there in the back of your mind. So the next question is, how do you make it happen? Well, as I was saying before, having a professional production when you're doing podcasting for business is vital. It reflects your business. So make sure you do the right thing in how you create it. I'd love to talk to you in Podcast Done For You and make it happen for you. But even if you don't talk to me, even if you've got your own way of doing it, then make sure it is professional. One thing I'd say to you out there, that if you think professional means going and hiring a studio so that you can record it in, think again. The studio is great. I'm not knocking the studio. And hello to all the people who have studios out there. What a great thing that you've provided for people. But it is not the main source of what you need. In fact, I would argue that doing something from the comfort of your office environment, much like I'm doing, is just as powerful, because you don't necessarily need to be sitting right directly, physically in front of someone to record. And the podcast environment is often unnatural for a lot of people, and it's uncomfortable because of the cameras and because of the other things that you've got going on. And you need production people to be able to handle it. Again, that's the value of a service like the one we offer, where you don't have to worry about any of those things. You just tell me that you want a podcast. We'll make it happen, and we'll find a way for everything to flow through so you don't have to worry about anything. Now, the biggest thing that you need to think about when it's podcasting for business is something that I alluded to a little bit earlier on, is ultimately the content. That's something, again, that we'd help you with, but my little tip from you in this particular video, because as I said, it is a whole nother video on that we will do at some stage in the future, is that conversations with your audience should be first and foremost in your mind. Think about who your audience is. Think about what they want to hear about, what value you can add, and the topics will flow. But think about them first, not about what you want to give them. And that's what this is about. I didn't record this podcast today because it's what I want to give you. It's because what people have asked for. It's what I've seen in search. What people are looking for is podcasting for business. Is it right? Well, the answer is yes, it is. And I hope you've got something out of this particular episode of Podcast Done For You. As I said, Podcast Done For You is a service that we can do for any business. We're working with businesses all over the world in making podcasts happen. You want to know more, we'll include some links in the show notes, as we always do. If you have any thoughts about other topics you'd like us to cover in this particular Podcast Done For You show, then please let me know. Either put it in the comments on whatever platform you're on, particularly on YouTube, or otherwise, don't hesitate to get in contact with me directly through the various links on the show notes below. And remember, please, please, please subscribe so you never miss an episode of Podcast Done For You. Thanks for you joining me and being a wonderful part of listening in. I really appreciate it. I hope you've got something out of the conversation. And until next time, I'll see you then.